Minister, you're very welcome in. I wasn't expecting to see you here this afternoon, and thank you for coming in. It is often said that failing to plan is a plan to fail. What we have at the moment is not so much of a plan to fail, but a plan for disaster. The plan is to phase out our use of fossil fuels while simultaneously increasing our demand for energy by 2030. At the moment, the bulk of this decision-making is being left to the energy sector. The aim of this motion is to put a stop to this disaster now. After all, we can't write legislation while sitting in the dark. The main thrust of today's motion is to address the current hypocrisy regarding our approach to nuclear power. As outlined in the motion, EirGrid is not allowed to use energy generated from nuclear fission. But the reality is that Ireland is already using nuclear energy. Approximately 0.93% of Ireland's electricity in 2020 was generated by nuclear power plants in Britain. This was revealed by the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. I'm sure any response today will discuss the dangers of nuclear power, but it is important we establish some facts. The reluctance to embrace nuclear energy seems to be based on the outdated understanding of what nuclear power currently is. It is no longer the 1980s. Concerns which were once valid are now only dead dogma clung to by green activists. It would be remiss of me today to fail to highlight the leaps and bounds that clean nuclear energy has made since the disasters of 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl. Chernobyl occurred in part due to the use of graphite in the nuclear reactor. Today's reactors no longer use this material. At the time, there was also no provision for containment. This has since become the norm for nuclear power plants since. Nuclear power produces less radiation than other sources of fuel. In fact, coal plants produce more radiation. Nuclear power produces virtually no carbon emissions. Small fission nuclear reactors, which this bill advocates for, are very efficient. Nuclear power also produces little waste. Nuclear power is a safe and highly efficient form of energy. Nuclear power plants operate over 90% of the time, while wind turbines only operate 35% of the time. By comparison, coal and other fossil fuel power stations operate approximately 50% of the time. No doubt my speech today would be a lot longer if we were to list out all the reasons why nuclear power is safe. Nuclear technology has come on greatly over the last 30 years. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the attitude towards it and many members of our Green Party. But if we don't adapt to nuclear power, data centres are due to consume at least 40% of Ireland's energy by 2030. Some estimates suggest that this could be as high as 70%. In 2018, our energy import dependency was 70%. The government has made promises they can't both keep to multinationals and other nations. We need to act sooner rather than later to find a solution. Deriding nuclear energy at home while importing almost 1% of it from Britain and refusing to amend the current legislation is, as a great man once put it, an Irish solution to an Irish problem. But it is a solution that plays dice with the well-beings and livelihoods of most our citizens, especially those in the private sector who are working from home and whose livelihoods may be threatened by even occasional power cuts. The East-West interconnector is fantastic for Ireland, but Brexit threatens the UK's status as an exporter of energy to Ireland. All going according to plan, the Celtic interconnector cable could provide us with energy from France in 2026 if the Energy Regulation Act 1999 was amended. France might be able to provide us with energy generated from nuclear fission to help meet our needs. After all, France has relied on nuclear power as its main source of energy for years. Simultaneously, weaning ourselves off gas while lacking sufficient plans to make up for the shortfall in the energy supply is unconscionable. The current plan is both insufficient and unfeasible, a point that my colleague Senator Ronan Mullen will discuss in his speech later. What is also unconscionable is the pain and the suffering which Ireland's current energy insecurity is causing and will continue to cause. If an abrupt change of direction in our energy policy is beyond us, I would ask you, Minister Ryan, to at least consider the human cost of the government's current approach. Carbon taxes exist as a disincentive, but can only be effective if members of the public are using more energy than they need to. Many people across all sectors of the economy are trying to reduce their energy use, and they are still struggling to pay their existing charges. St Vincent de Paul, in collaboration with the Red Sea Research and Marketing, found in March 2021 that 19% of people cut back on heating and electricity due to cost. This included 42% of families of those with an illness or disability. 36% of lone parents also found themselves in a similar situation. It is as if the government is trying to get blood from a stone by squeezing the most vulnerable in our society. Since March 2021, the price of housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels has increased by over 20.9%. Granted, the government has tried to address these problems by introducing fuel allowance, but this only applies to a few households. Minister Ryan, you yourself have advised people to take shorter showers and to slow down their driving. Quibs which would sound more like something out of a Father Ted quote than political oratory. Yet while these statements might be funny in a different context, what is not funny is that every year elderly people die during the winter because they are unable to heat
minute left,
just
as a
homes.
courtesy. It's up to yourselves.
This is something we've known for years, even as the cost of energy is ratcheting up. And yes, even as Dublin-based politicians sought to ban one of the most common fuel sources for tens of thousands of people in rural Ireland. When we know that approximately 100 companies are responsible for producing 70% of emissions, the approach by the government in foisting the burden on ordinary citizens seems almost cruel, in order to achieve what will be, on a global scale, such a small outcome. Large multinationals and businesses almost never seem to be the focus. It is always normal people who are paying the price, perpetuating the myth that the issue of climate change can be solved by individualist consumer choices. Minister, you've already said that nuclear energy is part of our future. Despite my criticisms of you today, I hope that you do consider that to be part of our future, and I agree with you. Whether we like it or not, our using nuclear power is inevitable. Let's not kick the can down the road and leave a worsened situation for future generations, but instead conduct the review outlined in today's motion and make this happen. Thank you.